Sexual consent education plays an important role in ensuring safe and respectful relationships for young people. As society becomes increasingly multicultural, sexual consent resources need to be accessible, clear, and engaging, as well as culturally inclusive. This year, we've partnered with True Relationships in Reproductive Health. True has recently developed a standalone sexual consent resource called Understanding Consent and Keeping Safe, created in consultation with young people from only white Anglo-Saxon backgrounds. True has identified that this resource will not meet the needs of those from culturally diverse groups. And that's where we come in. With a growing Chinese population in Australian communities and classrooms, and a historical lack of consent education for this group, we decided that Chinese and Chinese Australian young people would be an ideal target demographic for our research. We aim to uncover their understandings of sexual consent, what influences those understandings, and how consent resources can be changed to support their sexual consent education. Our study aimed to answer two questions. How do Chinese and Chinese Australian young people understand sexual consent, and what shapes these understandings? And how can sexual consent education resources be more appropriate, relevant, and accessible for Chinese and Chinese Australian young people? We interviewed Chinese and Chinese Australian people aged between 18 and 29. Interview questions focused on participants' cultural perspectives on sexual consent, their experiences with sexual consent education, and whether they found True's resource to be effective and accessible. Some key findings related to youth development, defined as the process by which young people's ideas about the world are formed and influenced. Most participants experienced a lack of formal sexual consent education, often turning to the internet and social media as an alternative. A common concern among participants was the unrealistic and often dangerous depictions of sexual consent seen in pornography.
They can figure it out by themselves on the internet, but usually not everything on the internet is the way it should be.
Overall, participants emphasised the importance of formal sexual consent education for young people approaching sexual debut. Other findings related to Chinese traditional values. Participants reported that in the conservative Chinese cultural context, discussions about sex and consent are taboo. Participants described a resulting culture of silence and shame around the topic.
Chinese culture is conservative. People might feel very vulnerable or sensitive when they talk about sex.
Insights into gendered sexual expectations were also revealed. Several participants described significant gender inequality in China and how traditional gendered expectations impact the dynamics of sexual relationships. During sexual interaction, men are expected to assert dominance, while women are expected to be passive.
I was raised to believe that the man of the house makes the decisions. Putting that same idea into a sexual environment, if he wants it, it doesn't matter what you think.
Most participants found True's resource to be engaging and relevant. Participants found visual metaphors such as the traffic lights to be effective tools for communicating concepts across culture and language barriers. However, large blocks of text in the resource were intimidating and hindered their engagement with the content. To ensure that future sexual consent education resources become more culturally inclusive, we recommend that True develop simpler, shorter, and translatable resources, distribute the resource from various access points, including online media, and continue to consult with cultural groups to create culturally specific resources. Through this study, we discovered that sexual consent education has failed to meaningfully support Chinese and Chinese Australian young people, and we uncovered an urgent need for better consent resources for this demographic. Overall, this research has been important in providing participants with a platform to voice their concerns. It is our hope that sexual consent educators, including True, continue to grant them such a platform